I Am Music. Playboi Carti's third studio album, officially shortened down to the title of Music, released on March 14th this year after a near 4.5-year wait from Carti fans. As expected, it instantly became 2025's highest-selling rap album, so the commercial success is here. But on a personal level, I consider this to be the weakest of Carti's 3 studio albums, and I think it's flat out not very good. But of course, I'm not gonna say that without giving any reasoning, so let's get into it and go through the whole album to pinpoint where my issues are. The album kicks off with the song Pop Out, and my first thought hearing this song was, 4.5 years later, and it sounds like we're still in the Whole Lotta Red era. This was the first slight red flag for me, considering each Carti era is pretty distinct in terms of its sound. Die Lit mostly does not sound like Whole Lotta Red in terms of Carti's voice or production, but straight away, this one doesn't seem to go anywhere too new, despite Carti experimenting with a couple new vocal styles post Whole Lotta Red up to this album. The most this does is add Ken Carson levels of distortion and noise to things, and it's actually one of the best songs on here. It just doesn't feel super fresh. Bit of a strange way to introduce what's supposed to be an entirely new project, but it was only one track of 30, so let's see where it goes next. We then move on to Crush, a track which never really gets going. Constant edging in musical form, with Travis joining the fun or lack thereof. It promises something interesting with choir vocals popping in every now and then, but again, it just doesn't go anywhere. And the volume balancing on the track is all over the place. I had to crank up the volume like 5 times listening to this. Still not super impressed, but let's go on to the next couple, K-pop and Evil Jordan. These two are the first here to continue the goofy Kermit-like delivery that Carti has introduced over the past couple years. And hey, at least I can give them points for having a vocal style that no other Carti album yet has, even though K-pop feels like a random throwaway, and Evil Jordan has very boring vocals from Carti, which is a shame because I love the little devilish, devious instrumental. Swamp Izzo sounded like he cared more on this song. Another thing I noticed about these tracks at this point is that they barely have any ad-libs. I guess for Carti to maybe separate this style from his previous music even more, but it does make the songs feel very empty when it's just straight up rapping from him that doesn't sound great. The broken up way that Carti raps kind of needs ad-libs to work effectively, if you ask me. Also, I'm pretty sure the new Evil Jordan intro makes it clear that this song is actually meant to follow up Pop Out on the track list, because they transition into each other pretty seamlessly, but they couldn't even care enough to get the track sequencing right. Mojo Jojo is a fun one at least, and the first Kendrick appearance on the album, which obviously comes with its own baggage, and yes, it is very hypocritical from Kendrick considering the whole deadbeat dad angle in the Drake beef, and Kendrick labeling himself as a hypocrite doesn't automatically negate the fact that he's clearly being one, but setting that to the side, I do find this one pretty fun. It would sound a bit empty if it was just the Carti vocals, like K-pop or Evil Jordan do, but the way that the Kendrick ad-libs bounce off of Mr. Cartier's vocals give the album a much needed injection of life. Shame that Philly is next. Talk about generic. Another Travis feature on this one, and it sounds like a Huncho Jack leftover production-wise, just with the addition of Carti doing an awfully weird sounding delivery. You could say that that weird kind of deep voice is a new thing for this era, but tell me this has been as consistent so far as Die Lit. or Whole Lotta Red, and I just won't believe it. We haven't reached the peak of it yet, but it is already starting to feel like throwing everything at the wall because you couldn't decide on one style to actually flesh out. However, for the next 4 tracks that close out this first third, things probably reached their highest point for me. Maybe. Radar was pretty hard, with Carti rapping over a beat that takes it back to an older style of trap music. Again, there's no consistency track to track really, but this one hit nicely enough. Lil Wayne not having a verse, but rather just a small vocal sample or a little vocal clip in there is a crime, but still, nice enough, and Swampizzle once again actually adds to this one for me. Then after that we get Rather Lie, a song that is carried hard by The Weeknd. Carti's parts here have come under fire for being AI. Some people say that they definitely are, others say that they definitely aren't, but regardless, he does sound pretty weird on here the more that I come back to it. I wouldn't be surprised if there is an AI filter on this one, because Carti doesn't really sound like this that much anywhere else on here.
She thinks she done made me, cause I keep her by my side. It wasn't you, it's me. It ain't me, it's you.
It sounds kind of weird, but just the whole discussion around that and the headache of figuring out whether it is AI or not kind of burned me out on it anyway. But because The Weeknd is such a smooth lad, the hook is one of the only things that sticks with me from this album. Fine Shit is a pretty fun one to follow it with some bouncy production, but it also has received heavy AI accusations, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's true at this point. I can't say this album feels like a full-fledged effort so far anyway. An album this lazy absolutely would use AI. And then finally, we closed this third with Backdoor, far and away my favorite song on the album, because it actually feels like a full, significant song. The beat is wonderful, Kendrick and Jhené Aiko have an amazing hook together, and I really like Carti on it. Something as simple as the way he says backdoor here just shows Carti's strength at making certain words or phrases stick just because of how he says them. And that is our first 10 tracks of a whopping 30 on this album. A couple of highlights, but I'd say almost none of these are top Carti songs for me, and the cracks are definitely already starting to show. Inconsistent style, no clear focus, possibly Carti's least enjoyable vocals yet, and songs that just exist but don't really do anything compelling. With that being said, it could definitely be worse. Not terrible by any means. So does this middle third start to pick things up? Well, not straight away. My complaint about inconsistent styles continues because the next song, Toxic, went to the all-red school of Carti doing his best Future imitation. And it doesn't even sound good. I'm sorry, but Carti's vocals are near comedic on this album at times. It sounds so off, man. Skepta comes through to add a little British flavor to the track, but it's another big old skipperoonie. Munyon, rushed one. Does anything here sound like 4.5 years of work? Because I'm yet to hear it. The drums have a decent pace to them here, so it feels more energetic, but that's bare minimum stuff. Frank, it's got a solid beat, the verses are cool enough, but the hook kinda sucks and that takes away from it a bit. Also, ad-libless verses again, which is just super dull with Carti's broken up flow. Oh wait, Charge Them Hoes a Fee actually has Future on it. It catches you off guard after hearing Carti doing his best impression of him a few tracks ago. Now this track is very noisy in general and Future isn't all that great on it, fully in mixtape Pluto mode, but it probably has one of my favorite Carti performances here. He sounds great against the intense synths and deep bass hits on the instrumental. Not too bad. If I made a music playlist, then this would probably make the cut. Travis was here too, but honestly, do we care at this point? Where isn't Travis? Hitting the halfway point of the album, Good Credit is the next one we get, the third to feature Kendrick, but the first to get a verse from him. And at first, I was honestly a bit underwhelmed by Kendrick's verse. I think because Like That just kind of raised my estimation for how nuclear Kendrick features would continue to be, but after that initial underwhelm wore off, it's actually pretty solid. He does his thing here and it's solid enough, even if it's not as explosive lyrically as Like That. I See You Baby Boy promises something interesting, kicking off with much more vibrant sounds compared to the generally rougher atmosphere the rest of the album has, so I quite like that aspect of it, and Carti does a decent job of matching the energy of it. It's alright, nothing I'm itching to come back to though. Wake Up Filthy is solid enough with its dramatic atmosphere, good production work here. I actually like how Carti mixes with it, but again, we get autopilot Travis Scott. Was that needed? I'd say no. You'd be forgiven for thinking that Jumpin' was the second to feature Future, but he's nowhere to be found here. It's just Carti's impression of him again, with the addition of a middling Uzi verse. But then we do have Future as a feature on the next one, Trim. I'm getting dizzy here, man. And he has one of the most energetic verses on the entire album. The non-stop flow from him was a nice, energetic section that the album really needed at this point. I'm sure you'll be very surprised to hear from me that he's the highlight of the song. Then to close out this third, Cocaine Knows, and man, that's a beat right there. The second this one starts, there's a different level of life to it, just an instant punchiness that reels you in. And the beat low-key carries the song, but smoker voice Carti is a perfectly fine fit for it. So we closed it somewhat strong on the last track, but generally, this third is where it started to hit me that this album does feel extremely lazy. If you told me most of the album was knocked out in 1 week's worth of studio sessions, maybe less, I would not doubt you one bit. Am I the biggest Carti fan? Not even close, I'm not a fan. But I enjoyed Whole Lotta Red from my first listen and still do, and this album actually made me go and revisit Die Lit to see what I think, and I actually somewhat enjoy that album now too, something that I thought would never happen. Again, we still got another third to go, but I just don't think that I can be convinced that this is Carti putting in a genuine effort. It feels like him phoning it in because he knows he can. So can music redeem itself in the third act? Well, we start off with We Need All the Vibes, a song that showcases this album's tracklist as being a refuge for any old shit Carti happened to record for. Because this is so clearly an unreleased Young Thug song that doesn't even fit the vibe of the album. Carti is barely here, a statement that could apply to this song and his parenting style. And I really like the song itself because I love So Much Fun by Thug, and it's similar to that style, but it is so obviously not meant for this album. Was 30 tracks a mandatory label demand for this album? Because it really feels like it at this point. Olympian has some fun little moments in the production, and I guess it tries to make things work by somewhat continuing the brighter sound of the previous song. Not too mad at this one, it's fine. Opium Baby, one of the most polarizing tracks on here. What I have to say for this is if you like Ken Carson's music or his song Lose It, then you'll probably enjoy this because it is also dominated by 808s, albeit to a less extreme extent, but I hate that song. Opium Baby is one of the worst things here to me. It baits you in by starting off sounding great, but it just feels like noise when the 808s come in and kind of overshadow everything else, along with the overstimulating gunshots mixed with Swamp Izzo yelling. This is like Mr. Beast retention editing, but in musical form. Twin Trim is essentially a Lil Uzi Vert interlude, and I like it. Again, it screams that this album is just trying its best to meet a 30-song quota, whether the individual tracks make sense or not, but at least it sounds good. That's followed by Like Wheezy, aka the track that kinda sounds like it samples SpongeBob. Again, this one goes in a more colorful, melodic, happy sounding direction, and it's nice enough. If this album is just gonna be a slapdash combination of random shit, then a song like this falls on my more preferred end of things for sure. Playboi Pluto is back again on This One Got It. He really was not confident in committing to one voice for this album, was he? I feel like the all red type delivery would be a much bigger focus on this album if he actually had faith in it. But for what it's worth, I actually think this one kinda bumps. The piano-based instrumental works nicely enough with this delivery style. Walk, future style again, but unlike This One Got It, it's a skip. Just very boring to listen to. I didn't like Hood by Air when I first heard it as a single, but within this album, it's perfectly fine. Carti at least sounds a little more focused on this one, and with its longer runtime, it does feel like a track that he maybe cared a little bit more about. Playboi Pluto? Did someone say Playboi Pluto? Another future voice on Overlay, over this weirdly happy sounding piano beat, just a strange track that only makes me feel joy because the end of the album is finally closing in, which takes us on to our last song here, South Atlanta Baby. And we actually close on a fairly nice note. The beat has a cool repeating vocal sample in there, Carti has a solid flow here, it's a serviceable closer with a cool sound to it. Now that we've finished the final third of this album, you might be asking, CDTV, it's been over a month, why are you only talking about this album now? And the reasoning for that is after my first listen to this album on stream, I was dreading coming back to it. I had no motivation to do so. 77 minutes is not the longest experience ever, but in my opinion, the number of tracks has much more of an influence over how long an album feels than the number of minutes that it goes for. More individual songs can make that experience feel longer, and this thing has 30 of them. So at this point, you've probably gleaned what my biggest issues with this album are. It feels quite lazy, very unfocused, and like Carti has no idea which direction to take his vocals or style in following Whole Lotta Red. The most noticeable thing in the way that he raps is the lack of ad-libs between the lines on a lot of the songs on here, and personally I'd consider that to be a bad thing, because my god does his rapping sound empty without them. And it really says something when this retroactively helped me to enjoy a Carti album that I never thought I would a little more. Listen, I have not budged my opinion on Die Lit much for years, but music made me revisit it and bump my rating up for it a bit more because Die Lit is much better as an album. Sure, it still has some songs that I don't love, but the way each song flows into the next one makes sense, and the consistent production style, along with a very consistent delivery style from Carti, makes for something cohesive, something with focus. Something that makes sense to package as an album. Not to mention, the songs themselves feel more lively on Die Lit, which is really something I thought I would never say. Music doesn't have that. This album is Carti coasting by on the fact that he has one of the biggest fan bases in hip-hop right now, and he could drop pretty much anything, and it'll be celebrated as music's version of the Mona Lisa. It's so non-committal to anything that it does, and it makes it feel like the least inspired Carti project in a long time. The album feels as about inspired as the title and the cover do. In all fairness, they do describe this pretty well. It's just music. It doesn't present itself as exciting or interesting, just as music. Now look, you could excuse the lack of cohesion by saying, well, this is supposed to have more of a mixtape feel to it, which sure, you could argue that. Swamp Izzo is essentially the host here, providing some much needed energy to the project. I actually think he's good on this. Some of the beats do call back to the mixtape era of trap music, but on top of all of that, I just don't think the individual songs are that good here either. There's a small sliver of highlight, highlights in between so much extra padding that this album could get into a head-on collision with a double-decker bus and walk away without a scratch on it. And this aforementioned lack of cohesion that I've really been focusing on probably isn't helped by the fact that the producer list for this album is absolutely huge. Die Lit had such a small list of producer credits, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the album feels super cohesive instrumentally as a result. The number of producers triples for Whole Lotta Red, and sure, that album isn't as focused as Die Lit, but I think the style and vision is still pretty distinct, and it's an evolution of Carti. Then the number of producers almost doubles, going from Whole Lotta Red to Music. It doubles from the triple. And look, maybe this is just confirmation bias, maybe I'm just searching for a reason here, but I don't think it's a coincidence that Carti's most focused album had only 6 producers on it, with Pierre Bourne handling the bulk of it, and his least focused album has 36 different producers. Too many cooks in the kitchen fuck up the dinner. Or whatever the idiom is. And that's pretty much what I think of it. If I had to sum up the album in 3 bullet points, it would be pretty lazy, very unfocused, individual songs that aren't that great. So those were all of my thoughts, and with that being said, what do you guys think of Music by Playboi Carti? Let me know down in those comments below. With that being said, I'll plug something at the end here. You can follow me on twitch.tv/CDTVProductions. I'm going to be doing some exclusive live streaming stuff over there, listening to music. Maybe we'll watch some videos together. It's going to be a very fun time, so go check it out. We're already starting to build a community over there, and it's a lot of fun. Much love to my channel members and Patreon supporters over there, with a special shout out to Henry Flores, I Am Regent, Lucas1123, and Neo Striker.